Welcome to another episode of Willing to Talk About It. I am your host, Daryl Harmon. Let's go. In today's conversation, author and certified life coach Brandy Hunt shares her journey from childhood to adulthood, highlighting the challenges and decisions she made along the way. She discusses growing up in a military family, dealing with ADD and learning disabilities, and the struggles she faced in high school, losing her dad just one day before Father's Day, having to deal with that loss, thinking she was going to die. Brandy opens up about becoming a mother and not wanting a child at first, and the challenges she faced and relationships at that time. She shares her decision to get married. That's very interesting. And the search for purpose in her life. In this part of the conversation, Brandy discusses her experience with forced relationships and the importance of making choices for herself. She shares her journey of finding God and the role of religion in her life. I'm sure that's going to surprise you. Brandy also talks about the healing power of writing and how it has helped her process her experiences through her book, Dealing with the Hand I Was Dealt. She emphasizes the importance of authenticity and overcoming shame. Brandy is passionate, very passionate about mental and behavioral health and helping others pursue their passion. She shares her bucket list. You don't want to miss that. She got some funny stuff. Busy Brandy, as I like to call her, also discusses relationships, the intimidation factor, and moving forward with her life after all she has been through. She shares her perspective on finding love and what it takes for someone to be in a relationship with Brandy. With no further ado, let's welcome Brandy Hunt.
Yeah.
Welcome, Brandy. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. And just so you all know, Brandy was one of the first people to interview me when I came out with my first book. So I'm very thankful to her and her consistency and her willingness to work with authors in this space. So, Brandy, tell me, what was it like growing up in Greenville?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. My 10-year anniversary is next year of being an author and publisher. And so to hear, people say thank you doesn't happen a lot. A lot of people, I'm not saying that they're not thankful, but sometimes people don't stop to say thank you for, staying in the race because it's hard out here.
That's
And
true.
so thank you.
That's true.
It's such an honor to help people, tell their stories and things like that. But we'll get there. So how was it growing up in Greenville, South Carolina, country? This is the country, and so it
Okay.
was, barefoot, playing outside. I actually did not move here until 2000, excuse me, not 2000, 1993 ish. I actually grew up in Fayetteville, North Carolina.
Okay. Okay. Fayetteville. A
Yes.
little, is that a little more country?
Well, it's military country. And so my
Okay.
father was in the military. So we went there in like 84, 83, and then we came to South Carolina in the early 90s.
Okay. And what was the home like? I mean, military family, what was that like? Are you the only child?
Oh no, I have an older sister. God rest in
Okay.
peace. She She passed away early last year, and then I have a younger brother. So I'm smack dab in the middle of a
Oh, you
sister and
middle baby. Okay.
yes, I'm the middle baby.
Okay.
The older I get, the more sense it makes. And so
Okay.
it was wonderful, actually. My parents appeared to love each other, from a little girl standpoint. Me and my father had a great relationship. And to this day, my mom
Oh, that's
says that
great.
I act just like him. Personality wise, she always says, your daddy, he used to walk around like, he owned the place and you have, the same personality. And so it was wonderful. Military life for us, though, we didn't travel. So, like a lot of military families travel, he traveled,
Okay.
but we stayed put.
Okay. 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 So that's great. Now, what were your goals growing up? What were some of your goals growing up?
Ooh. So I really didn't have any goals as a kid, so like they'll be like, what do you want to be when you grow up? I wanted to be a dancer. So that was my goal, was
Okay.
as long as I could dance. It didn't matter where I danced. And so, as I got older and, things like that, I wanted to be a Dallas cowgirl and I wanted
A
to be
Dallas cowgirl.
yes. And I wanted to be a military police officer.
Wow. Okay. Okay. Now, so I bet you had some good moves.
Oh, absolutely. I was always the entertainment for the family gatherings, and we didn't have TikTok back then, but if we did, I'm
Right.
sure that I would be viral. I'm almost positive.
I believe it. I believe it. You have a bubbly personality. I can tell
Thank
you were very outgoing. Now, were you
thank
on anything at the school that involved dance?
Yes, I was on everything at the school that involved dance. And I was also the winner of the spelling bee till I was in about the eighth grade. So I had the two brain going on. So some people are
Uh-huh.
just creative and some people are just logical. And for the life, like for my entire life, I thought I had to be one or the other. And so I was
Right.
always in a book. But then when my brain would get tired, I would be somewhere causing havoc, as my mother would say. I would be
Right.
somewhere causing trouble. But for punishment, my dad didn't want to discipline me the old school way, whoopings and stuff like that. So he would make me read the encyclopedia and the dictionary for
Really?
punishment. Yes,
Wow. Okay. Okay. And it seems to have worked out for you. Now, what was
absolutely.
that like? What was that like sitting down? I mean, I've had to do some things similar, but it was more like I will not talk in class, and
Add
I
that
had to
too.
fill up like, oh, you had
Yep.
that too.
Yep, I had that.
Okay. Okay.
How was it? If my memory recalls me, I cried a lot. It felt
Okay.
like punishment then because you're talking about 8, 9 years old, being able to tell you the first 10, 12 letters of the letter A, just because that's how much I had to read because that's how much I was getting in trouble. However,
Okay.
but my dad, he would try to make it somewhat fun. So he would say, like, if I ask him, what does a word mean? He'll say, well, just go look it up and tell me what you find. What I
Okay.
didn't know at the time is that I had been tested for ADD. And it had came back that I had ADD. And this is, she talking about like the 80s. And so
Okay.
my mom was like, and for people who don't know, the medicine had just rolled out. And people were reporting that their children were falling asleep in class, and it was really taking a toll on their emotional state. And my mom didn't want to do that, so she asked the doctor, "What else can we do?" And she said,
Okay.
they said, let her dance and be a cheerleader and burn the energy off. So I always look back. I never knew that until I was 38. Never knew I had any
Wow.
kind of diagnosis or anything. I just happened to be looking at like the signs, and I'm in college now to become a therapist. And so I was like, I called my mom and I said, "Do I have ADD?" And she said, "Probably not anymore."
Oh, wow. So that
that
was
was
news to you.
that was news to me. So this is, encouragement to anybody who feels like they can't live, with the diagnosis or whatnot. I've lived my entire life not knowing, but I believe that my father knew. So with ADD, they do say that, you're going to have a learning disability and things like that. Well,
Right.
he hit it, early on. And so my brain was able to recall numbers and letters. And like I said, South Carolina didn't have the spelling bee. And so I didn't participate when I got here. So it cut off at like the sixth or seventh grade. And so, but I won
Right.
every year up until then.
All right. So you were doing a lot, and then you find out years later. Now, were you ever medicated for the ADD? Do you remember?
I was never medicated. They didn't want to medicate me. And so they just dealt with it. Well, I dealt
They
with
just
it.
dealt with it.
Yeah.
Right. And
And
and,
so,
and like you said, it was new.
yes.
It was new. So, like you said, in the '80s, we didn't know what was going on. And I was talking to a friend the other day, and we were thinking. I said, I think that guy he probably was on the spectrum. Now that I look back on it, and
Yeah,
I mean, all of us probably were in some way, shape, or form,
that is
right?
correct.
So
Yes.
it's just that for you to be diagnosed and to be able to say that now in 2023, it's like wow, and I mean, I know they was giving out that Ritalin, they were just pushing that stuff on our
Right.
kids. So
Yes. Yes.
that's great.
And then I almost thought maybe you're talking about children here. And like I said, I'm brand new to the therapy scene as far as the terminology, but I've been studying um, the dictionary, so I've seen these words, across my history. But I almost think that maybe they were just diagnosing people that had, two or three symptoms, and trying to push this medication out there. And my parents was just like, wait. There's nothing wrong with her. She's just overactive. She just won't sit down. But what we found
Correct.
out later was I was bored because I was at
Right.
home pretty much educating myself. I didn't have to
Correct.
I didn't have to study until about the ninth grade, and we'll talk about what happened when I got to the ninth grade. But up until
Okay.
ninth grade, I didn't study. I just sat down and took tests and passed them. And so what I
Somewhat of a
believe is that
genius.
it's possible that I had some of the signs and some of the symptoms, and because there was not a lot of study done on it, my parents just kind of said, you know what, we'll figure this thing out ourselves. And then God stepped in and said, I'll do the rest.
Well, Brandy, as I'm listening here, I'm hearing that your mother and father, although your father possibly traveled a lot and did things away from the home, they really stuck together in the decision making.
Yes.
Yeah, that seems that it was very valuable in your life at that time.
Absolutely. Even when so my oldest sister has a different father, and but I never knew that until I might have been 10, 9 or 10 by the time I
Okay.
found out that we had different fathers. And I was like dumbfounded. I was like, how? How does that happen? What do you mean she has a
Right.
different dad? Because her dad was coming to
Right.
pick her up. And I was like,
Right.
what do you mean? Her dad's in the living room. And but
Right.
that's how connected we were to to our family. There was no outsiders. If you came to our house, everybody was family. And so I do look at my parents, like I said, behind closed doors, they might have been fighting. They might have been fighting like
Correct.
cats and dogs. But every Sunday, and actually every day, so you're talking about the 80s, from the 80s to the early 90s, we were at that dinner table. And that's something that I miss about the family structure, because of course we have phones and all of these things now. And
Right.
so not a lot of people eat around the dinner table with their family. And so that's one of my fondest memories of my childhood.
Okay. 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 That's great. That's great. So then, fast forward a little bit, you get to high school, and it starts to get a little bit more challenging. Tell us about that.
Well, the summer of my ninth grade year, my father passed away.
Oh wow.
Yep. And it was the day before Father's Day.
Oh Jesus.
There is no bigger tragedy, I guess, maybe on Father's Day. Maybe your father dying on your birthday, or something like that. But
Right.
to me, I have not experienced a greater tragedy than my father dying the day before Father's Day, and I was 12 years old. So you're talking about that was June. School started in August, and my whole brain took a left. It was
Oh,
almost like my brain was zapped. All the information that I had, all the joy that I had, all the
right,
everything. It just seemed like I just hit rock bottom. I would go into class and try to still do that no studying thing, and I was failing. And so my mom, she came, they called her up to the school, and they're like, "Hey, she was a straight A student up until
right.
she got here. What's going on?" And my mom ended up telling them, father passed away over the summer. She was really nice to the people, but when we got home, baby, she say, "Do you want to go join your father? If not, you need to get it together." And of
Okay,
course, we're talking about the 94. So therapy for Black
okay,
people was not a thing. And so
correct.
I don't look back and be like, oh, they should have sent me to therapy. Maybe at the school, they did. I think they did send me to counseling, but it
Okay.
was just such a. It took me a long time to get back to even wanting to be alive. I didn't even want to be here.
Wow. I can't
And so
imagine. I can't
it was.
imagine.
And of course, I had my older sister. Now I'm mad at her because remember, she still has her dad.
She still has her dad.
Yes.
Right,
And
right,
it was just like this disdain inside of me, like, why didn't you take her dad? Why take my dad?
right,
Or,
right,
or why
right.
take anybody's dad? And so now as a child, you don't know how to process all of these thoughts. And then you have
That's correct.
adults telling you, just be happy, go to church, just go back to doing what you were doing. And your brain is literally telling you, do nothing, sleep all day, eat all
Right,
day,
right.
watch TV. It was that first year, I just remember even going to the funeral and, the casket side, when they put the body in the ground, I said, God,
Correct.
y'all could just put my body in the ground too.
Mm.
I remember saying that.
Yeah, that's tough. So mom was able to process it, kind of thing, where she knew, hey, I got these babies. And was the death sudden, or was it kind of like, okay, I got to prepare for this. My husband's gonna die, and I need to prepare.
It was sudden. It was very sudden.
Sudden.
Yes.
Wow.
There were
Wow.
other people involved, into, not go down a rabbit hole, but there were other people involved in his death. And so it was a very unexpected. However, I found out later. So I thought he just so they told us he committed suicide.
Okay.
We'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
And so
Okay.
for
That's
the
fair.
duration of my life, I believed that. And then I found out later that he had a choice to make, and he chose to go that route. He could either stay and face some consequences or take his own life. And he chose to take his life because they threatened to come and take ours.
Wow. Wow. That's. I mean, you see movies about it, Brandy. You even may sit around and talk about it and talk about what you would do.
And even
But
saying it now, I don't know if the people are still alive or not. Um, I have no idea. You're
yeah,
talking about 1994. I've prayed for
right,
those people that were present that day. There was
correct.
so much that I've heard behind the scenes. But if I do believe that everything happens for a reason. And so
Okay.
I've prayed for many, many years that whatever happened and why ever it happened, that it was well with my father's soul when he left here. But
That's
no,
very important.
my mother did not take it well. No, no, none of us really took it well because it was just so sudden.
Of
It was
course.
just like, wait, he. I remember him telling me, and this is very important to the book. Um, I'll see you later. He came in to tell me he was going to come to the car wash where we were doing the youth car wash that day. And I said,
Hmm.
"You going to come to the car wash?" And he was like, "Yeah, I'll be there." And he knew he wasn't going to be there, but he had to tell me,
Wow.
"I'll see you later." And so the very next, that was at like 6 o'clock that morning. And by 1 o'clock, no, that was a Friday. So he came in on that Friday. and then he worked overnight, and that morning is when everything happened. And so I never saw him again.
Mm, wow. Wow. So that's 94, your
Yes.
freshman year of high school.
Yep.
Now, how do you go on to sophomore, junior, senior year? Tell me a little bit about that. How do we get through that?
We got through that by much pain and suffering. So
Uh huh.
the ninth grade year, I pretty much failed the whole thing. I think I might have made
Okay.
D's and F's, but
And they
or a
push.
I really struggled through. And then the next year, I was talking to my best friend, and she was like, "Why don't you do cheerleading? Cheerleading will make you happy. Like, literally, you're bubbly, you have a great personality. You just need to get out, get back in the world and try to do things that make you happy." And so I was like, "Okay,
Okay.
great." So I go to my mom, and she's like, "No, I'm not paying for it. I'm not, you're getting F's. They're not going to let you on the team anyway. But if you can
Right.
do for the first semester, if you'll get to C's, I'll let you cheerlead." And so I got to all C's. And so I started cheerleading in the 10th grade, and I stayed there until 12th grade. So that's how I made it through.
Okay. 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 And so those girls, that camaraderie, that team, they kind of connected,
Yes.
and I'm not going to say took your mind off of it, but kind of
Yeah, absolutely.
redirected your energy a little bit, right?
Right. No, and I think it's a fair statement to say that they did. In days that I would break down, crying out of nowhere, because you're talking about I'm going through teenage emotions, right?
Right.
So add on to it becoming a girl with
Correct.
multiple hormones, and then
Right.
processing grief at the same time. It was bananas.
Right.
It was
Right.
bananas.
Right.
Getting into arguments with your mom, your sister, your brother, who all,
Right.
my brother is 4 years younger than me, so he was only like 9 when this happened. My
Oh
sister
wow.
was like 17, 18. So we were still all under 18. And my mom is just like, "Do whatever y'all want to do. Just come home every day." That was it. That was
Right.
her only request was, older sister, if you go somewhere, take your younger sister. Son, you got to stay here or go with your cousins.
Uh
That
huh.
was her only rule, so that she would know where we were. But she kind of checked out. She'll tell people, and then she'd be like, she just checked out. Her body was present, but she's
Yeah.
like, she was really not here.
Wow. Yeah, I can imagine, and
Yeah,
that's I can imagine. I mean, as a father, I tell you, that's I mean, I as a father, I'll be honest. Everything I do since I've had my kids, it surrounds them in some way.
yeah.
It surrounds them in some way. So I just, my heart goes out to you, your
Thank you.
brother, your mother, and and that's tough. And even and to be honest with you, your daughter as well, because my grandfather was a very influential part of my life, and I had them for a long time in my life. I'm 50 now, and up until about 10 years ago, I had both of them in my life, and they made me who I am today. So for you to be able to persevere through that, it and the smile, you always give off this radiant energy, and so this I like where this is going. Basically, I like where this is going. All right,
Thank
so
you. I
you yeah. So you graduate high school,
hmm By the hair of my chinny chin chin, I
and
just
and
want to
then
say
what
that.
what do you think
I had to
by the
get
hair of your chinny chin
a
chin?
68. Excuse me. Back then, so I had to get like a 72 in algebra 2 in order to graduate high school. I got a 73.
Right,
To this day, I feel like that lady passed me so I could get on out of their school, because because when I say
right, right,
I
right,
got one
right.
point above what I needed, I feel like the lady, I told her,
Uh
when I
huh.
say I tore her nerves up, because math was not my, it just didn't come to me like words did, probably because I spent the majority of my life reading and writing. And so now
Right.
I got turn on my
Right.
math brain, and it just wasn't clicking for me. And she was a sweet little older lady, like, so you're talking like 90s. She was already in her 60s. So, uh, yeah, so she's in there teaching, little people who, mouths going a million miles. We tore that lady nerves up. So I think Miss Thompson is her name. I think she has, passed on to the other side, but she was such a sweet lady. But I know I tore her nerves up. But yes, after high school, we thank God that I even made it through high school because I wasn't there.
You graduated by the skin of your teeth. You got a 73 and you needed a 72.
Yeah.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Now, what about the prom? Did you do the prom at least?
Oh, now, I always been fashionable, so absolutely. I
Okay.
actually went to four proms.
Four proms.
So I went to,
You got me
yes.
beat. Yeah, you got me beat. Four proms.
So I went to two in 11th grade, and then I went to two in 12th grade.
Oh, wow.
So in 11th grade, I went to my own and another gentleman's. And then in 12th grade, I went to my own and another gentleman's on the same night.
Oh, different schools.
So they were different schools and they were at the same building, the Hyatt downtown.
Okay.
So, how they have the conference rooms.
Yeah.
So it was on the same night
Oh,
in
my
just two
God.
different buildings.
Yeah, this
My
is.
mama was sick of me. When I say she was so sick, she was like, I'm not buying not one more dress.
Now, hold up. Now,
And I think I went to,
you didn't wear four different dresses, though.
well, to the one where me and the gentleman went on the same night to two different proms. I wore one dress.
Okay. Okay. I'm about to say that would be a little bit too much now.
Yeah.
But I could see you doing it, though.
But I was working, so I paid for my own dresses, or I bartered for dresses.
Oh, okay. Okay. Wow. Wow. So then your daughter comes along. When did your daughter come along?
So she came along in 2000,
Okay.
and let's back up to when I graduated high school. I wanted to go to be a Dallas Cowgirl, remember? And
Ooh,
so that was my goal, is to graduate high school, go try out for the Dallas Cowgirls because I could flip and stuff. So I was doing back flips and front flips, and
yeah.
I was on the competition team, and I was going to, on my off time, be a military police officer. I had already taken the MEPS test. I went down to Columbia,
Uh huh.
got everything done. I scored very high. I needed to lose 3 pounds, I think. I was 133 pounds soaking wet. Amen.
Uh huh. Uh
To
huh.
glory, God be the glory.
Uh huh.
And so I had to lose 3 pounds. That was it.
Right.
Tell me why I got hurt in my senior year.
What?
And I did a toe touch and I came down on my knee. Like my feet were not up under me, and I slammed into my knee like straight down.
Wow.
And I got up. Well, they got me up. And the freak accident part is on the other side of the gym where the boys were wrestling for wrestling practice.
Uh huh.
A boy broke his knee at the same time.
Really?
Yes, we screamed at the exact same time. To this day, I think I had to carry that man's pain. So
Right.
they carried him out though, because back in the day, cheerleaders wasn't considered a sport, and they carried him out, and I had to limp out. And when I
What?
got home, my cheerleading buddy that drove me home, my mama was like, "She got to go to the hospital."
Right.
So they got me to the hospital, and I ended up having to have surgery. I couldn't cheer for the rest of the year. So the thing that had made me happy all of that time is now gone.
Right.
Like, and now my dreams have shattered around it, and so it's like I grew this disdain all over again against God. I was like, God, why would you give me something that made me happy?
Right.
I was so excited, and now it's dead. And I grew this statement in my heart was like, I'll never love anything or anybody. I don't like flowers, not now, but like
Hmm.
back then, I would say don't give me flowers because flowers die.
Right.
I wouldn't connect to people because people die.
Correct.
It was really deep, deep down inside.
Yeah. 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 I can relate from the standpoint of real quick losing people at a young age. I lost a lot of friends in my teenage years. And so we kind of got a little numb to it a little bit. We just didn't want to,
Yes.
just wanted to stay away, didn't want to go to any more funerals. And so I
Yeah.
can kind of relate in such a way to where everything you want to disconnect. You don't want long relationships with anything.
Yeah. And oh, let me back up that 6 months after my father died, his mom died of a broken heart.
Of
And
course.
so every night that I would go to sleep, I would think I was going to die because my heart was broken because of my dad.
Correct.
And that's why I'm hurting. So I'm going to die. And every night I would just literally be looking at the ceiling. And my mom would be like, "Why aren't you asleep?" And I couldn't tell her because I think I'm going to die in my sleep like my grandma.
Right. Right. Wow.
I was literally being traumatized and tormented by my own thoughts.
Correct. And throughout this time, but you were never medicated, no anxiety medication, no things like that. You just processing it and
I
dealing with
never
it.
took anything.
Now I've heard you.
And if anybody's listening, I do not recommend that. Being on the other side, especially as much research is being done on different medications and things like that. If you have death in your family and you can tell that your child seems to be, because back in the day they just said we was acting out. They're just acting out.
Right.
No, there's something wrong,
Something wrong.
and it would behoove you to see what it is that it is attached to their behavior, but something happened to trigger their brain to operate in a different direction and
Correct.
than what they were already operating. And so, no, I didn't take anything other than partying,
Partying. Right.
late nights, early mornings,
Wow.
partying
You was
every night.
in Fayetteville.
Oh no, I was in South Carolina by
You
then.
was
So
in
we
Greenville.
moved to South Carolina
Okay.
in 1993 to, well, we moved, yes, to Greenville.
Okay.
So we moved here in 93. So by the time all of that happened with my dad and stuff like that, I went to high school at Blue Ridge. I
Okay.
don't know if you're familiar, but that's in Greer. And so they don't look like me.
Oh.
And so for the duration of my life, I've been told you talk like the others
Mm.
or you act like the others.
Uh-huh.
I don't quite fit in with the ones who look like us, and I don't quite fit in with the ones who don't look like us
Right.
because to them, I still look like us.
Right.
But in high school,
Right.
it was normal. Like in Fayetteville, there was no color.
Right.
It was not a black thing, a white thing. Our neighbors were Korean. One neighbor was Korean. One neighbor might have been Hispanic. I think my mom's best friend was Hispanic. I didn't know that any of this had a name until I got to South Carolina. And then I knew I was black.
Was that
And
more
they made sure that I knew
was that more because it was more military around the diversity in Fayetteville?
I believe so.
Okay.
Yes, I do believe so. And Greenville is getting better, but you're talking about where I went to school was a very racist area. They
Okay.
had riots and stuff like that still in the early 90s.
Okay.
So you're talking about a culture shock.
Right.
I didn't get, so I got to middle school there. So I did sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, and then ninth grade. So the middle school was not as bad, but when I got to the high school, it was like you could tell they didn't want us there,
Wow. Wow.
but we had to be there. And
Right.
they bust us about 45 minutes away, where like my neighbor went to a kind of half and half with racially divided.
Right.
But even with that kind of trauma and triggering, I was always on edge. Like, am I gonna make it home today? Are
Wow.
they going, try to shake the bus? Because that's what they would do stuff like that while we was leaving. It was like literally being back in the 50s and 60s,
I was gonna say because I
and you're
mean
like,
at that time in the 90s, I mean integration was not even 40 years old at that time.
right.
Yeah.
And so, but on the cheerleading squad, there was none of that. It was girl power. all day, every day.
Okay.
But other than that, it was very tense. And so, with me now being in mental health, I challenge parents to not just look at your kids' behavior because they're bad. Something's wrong.
Right.
Something's off somewhere. It could be school, it could be schoolwork, it could be the teachers. And you don't just fix it overnight. Well, just be nice. Just don't say nothing.
Uh-huh.
Just it's just not that simple. We have to dig a little deeper and show our kids that we're on their side.
Right.
Not just We have to show our kids that we love them and that we're willing to side with them, not just because they're our kids,
Right.
because right is right and wrong is wrong.
Right.
So if my kid, even with my own child, I would tell her, if you're wrong, when I get to the school,
Yeah.
I'm going to side with the side of right.
Right. Right.
And so, but when there were times that I knew she was trying, she was doing her work, and she was still being harassed by a teacher, you best believe
You went
I'm
in.
gonna side with my kid.
Right.
And when we get to the house, I'm not gonna yell at her and be like, "Oh, you should have just ignored it,"
Right.
because even like now they're like, "Oh, these kids, they shouldn't talk back to their teacher." Well, maybe the teacher should learn how to talk to the kids.
Correct.
Some of
Correct.
these kids aren't in the wrong. I think that people don't want to deal with their own issues and they want to put them off on other people as
Mm-hmm.
just bad behavior. Oh,
Right.
well, they just need to change.
Correct.
Maybe you need to change how you're talking to them.
Right.
Maybe you need to understand that they lost their best friend. Maybe their father or mother or sister or brother passed away. Especially like with COVID, people of all kind of ages was passing
That's
away,
true.
and we were still expecting our kids to show up every day, just push through.
Right.
And now everybody's looking crazy. Like, well, what's wrong with the kids? Why they don't want to go outside and play? Why they don't want to do nothing but be on their phone?
Right.
Because they're tired too.
They're tired.
They're not just
Mentally.
they're not machine, and that's what the society wants to turn us into, these machines that they want to make. Why don't you make the machines and leave the humans alone?
Right. Right.
I'm done.
Right. That's good. That's good. That's good. So you get out, you party through after you got hurt. Went to 4 proms, which is amazing. You broke my record. I only went to one, but I'm sure you broke somebody's record. 4 proms is amazing. And now you're out. You attempt to go get on the Dallas cheerleading squad. What was that like? How far did you get?
I didn't make it. I busted my knee.
Okay, so
Me busting my knee, it canceled everything.
okay, okay, but that's what you wanted to do.
Yes.
Okay, so then whatever happened with the military police? That's out too.
They didn't want me. Nobody wanted me at all. They were like, so of course the cheerleading squad was like, well, we'll have to see what kind of physical ability you'll have once you heal up.
Right,
Because I couldn't even walk. Like I couldn't walk on my knee or anything.
right.
And
That's
so they're
tough.
like, we'll try back a year from now. So I graduated when I was 17.
Okay.
Yes. So I graduated when I was 17. And so I said, okay, well, if I can't do Dallas, I can still do the military. I get to the
Uh-huh.
office and they're like, no, you're going to have to heal up and then do everything all over again.
Wow.
I'll be John Brown.
Yeah.
So I didn't have anybody pushing me past high school. And I don't blame anybody. Again, life is life. And I ended up where I ended up. Um, but I wasn't pushed to go to college. Maybe it was financial.
Uh huh.
Maybe they knew that I had just struggled through high school and
Right.
trying to put me in college was just a bad idea.
Correct.
But whatever the case may be, nobody said I had to go to college.
Now,
So
did
I
your
didn't.
sister go? Did your sister go to? Did your sister go to college?
She did not.
Okay, so it wasn't like a normal thing. So you kind of like, okay, I got these babies.
Yeah.
They graduated high school. I'm okay with that.
That's what she said. She said, as long as you get out of college, if you graduate high school, that's all I ask of you. If you go to college, great. Let me know where to sign, and please get a scholarship. And if I knew then what I know now, being a minority, I probably would have went to school for free, but I didn't know that.
Right.
And then Clemson had sent me a free ride to be a nurse, but I didn't want to be a nurse.
Right.
And so I kind of just threw caution to the wind. I'll figure this thing out on my own.
Okay.
And first, I was very disappointed still. And, I said, well, I'll just go get a regular job. So that's what I did. And my daughter came along about when I was 20.
Okay.
And then life really changed.
Of course. That kid changes things. Okay, so your daughter's Anaya.
Yes.
Right. And the funny thing is, I have a stepdaughter. Her name is Anaya.
Oh, yep.
Yeah. Instead of an
Yep.
I,
It means a gift from God.
yeah, but instead of an I, she spells it with an A. Anaya.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah. She's
cute.
17, 17, a little younger than your daughter. Yeah.
Oh, good luck.
I don't even want to go there with that one. That's tough. But okay, so Anaya comes along, and now you start to tighten up a little bit.
No, not really.
Not really.
Um, so, back to dealing with the hand I was dealt. I want to, those listening, I created a pattern in my life, or a pattern was created. I didn't do it on purpose, but let me go back to when I turned about 16, 17, and started liking boys.
Okay.
Um, I was rudely interrupted and shown that all boys aren't nice to girls.
Okay.
We'll just leave it at that.
Mhm.
And so my first interaction with boys was not a good one.
Oh wow.
So in my mind, I was like, well, all boys can't be like that. I'll go try another one.
Okay.
And so that didn't work out because he was a football player and he wanted to, he was braggadocious. And, can you imagine me with that kind of personality?
Right.
It's not going to work.
Right.
And
Right.
so I was like, well, I'll just be by myself. I mean, I was 17. It's, huge decision making at 17,
Right.
17, 18. But I had a few rough run-ins with boys early on.
Okay.
And so my first two, what I would consider imprints when it came to boys and men,
Uh huh.
was that my father left me
Right.
and boys are mean. Now I got to go be an adult
Right.
with those imprints in my head.
Right.
So, along comes Naya's father, and he was nice, he was kind, he bought me whatever I wanted,
Uh huh.
he rescued me from my mama's house whenever I called him.
Took you off the
He
porch.
literally, yeah, I'd be like, I'm standing on the porch, come get me,
Right. Right.
and he would
Right.
be right there.
Right.
And so I was about 18. So I feel like, again, life does what it does. Your imprint is what it imprints.
Right.
And so going into dating and things like that, with that imagery is that my father left me and he didn't love me. That's why he left me. So remember, I didn't know
You
what I
didn't
know
know.
now.
Right. Right.
All I know is you came in and you said, I'll see you later, and you're not here.
Right.
And then the other boys that I liked, I was nice, I was kind, and you were still mean to me and did mean things to me.
Right.
And so they must be garbage.
Right. All of them.
So I'll treat them that way. Of course, that's a bad theology to have.
Yeah, that's
But
terrible.
then comes along one that's kind of balanced. So now I'm confused because sometimes he's nice to me, and then sometimes he's really mean. And I'm thinking, maybe I'm gonna just wash the whole slate clean. I'm gonna
Uh-huh.
give everybody a chance. So then I go, so when people be like, oh, you should multi date, that's exhausting. I just want to say that.
Right.
Even in my 20s,
Right.
I felt like that was very exhausting.
It's
Now, let's
dangerous
also
too.
add in it's very dangerous.
Hmm.
Let's add in the piece of Naya. Naya's been born. Me and her father ended up splitting ways just because, again, it was that imbalance of that bad side of him
Hmm.
that I couldn't handle.
Was he older than you?
No, he's my same age.
Okay.
And he's a very good father. So if he was to ever hear this, me and him, we did not get along. Our personalities clashed. We would get into fights, stuff like that.
Okay.
I'm 5 foot tall, but if you swing, I'm swinging back.
Right.
The
Right. Right.
old me.
Right.
And so I didn't want to do that. So let's roll back to the 12, 13-year old version of me that still has all that anger
Right.
and all of that hate. And boys have already been mean to me. And now I got one more to put over there with the mean boys.
Right.
So I've been going to church this whole time. And I want to kind of bring everything together with that.
Yeah. Yeah. I was
And
going
one
to
day I
mention that.
said, you know what, God? I said, so I'm 23, 24 at this point. I've partied hard.
Uh huh.
I've tried to date your sons, Lord, and they not doing right.
Right. Right.
Something's wrong.
Right.
I got this baby that I don't want, and I talk about this in the book. I
Okay.
did not want a baby,
Okay.
and obviously people are like, well, you know how babies are born. If you grew up in my house, no, you didn't.
Right.
And so I just leave it at
Yeah.
that.
But
And
it wasn't
so
clicking like that.
yeah, here I am, a full blown adult, feeling helpless in life.
Mm-hmm.
23, 23, 24. Now I love my baby. But when I had to make the decision to have her was a very hard decision, solely based on the fact that I did not want her to be fatherless, because that's all I would ever hear is, you have a baby, the daddy gonna leave.
Right.
You have a baby. And I'm like, well, why would he just leave?
Right.
Because I was naive. Remember, I went up the hill where their families stay together. They don't have as much problem with it as we do.
Right.
Statistically, their fathers are at their house. When they would invite me over to dinner and stuff like that, their fathers were there. And had my father not passed away, he wasn't down the street not talking to me. He was gone.
Right.
So my childhood mind is struggling with these thoughts
Right.
of, so if I have a baby, the daddy gonna leave me? So I asked him, I'm like, if we have this baby, are you leaving? And he's like, no, I'm not leaving.
Oh,
I
okay.
said, but let's just be clear. I don't want you. I don't want you. I don't intend to marry you. I don't want to do it. I didn't want to get married
Right.
because I had never seen a healthy marriage other than the other side. I had not seen one in our community
At this point
at
in your
all,
life.
other than except for my parents.
No, I mean at
And
that point where you were at that point in your life.
yep, all the women that I knew were either mean to their husbands, or they were divorced,
Okay.
or they were single.
Okay.
And I was like, are these my options?
Right.
This is my option. And I said, I don't want to be mean to someone just because that's what I learned.
Right.
So I chose to be single. I was like, I'd rather just raise my baby on my own. Well, then I was ridiculed for that. Well, you shouldn't want to raise your baby. Her daddy is down the street. If we need anything, he'd be right there. Half the time, I have to beg to get my baby back because that's how involved he was with her life.
Okay.
But what happens in being a black single mother, first of all, it does get hard.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they're down the street or not, picking kids up from school, and, just life's happenings. And now I'm trying to find purpose, because remember, I'm in church and all they talk about is finding your purpose
Uh-huh.
and do things with your life and all of these things. I'm like, okay. So I try to get on that path. And then it's, well, you need to be at home with your kid. Now, y'all are going to have to make up your
Right.
mind.
Right.
You
Right.
want me to find a purpose, or you want me to be a stay-at-home mom?
Right.
And it's like, that's why, like, even the conversations online really bother me, because I'm like, can you imagine a person hearing four different narratives
Uh-huh.
and trying to figure out which one they should do for their life?
Correct.
And so I always kept hearing, get married, get married, get married, get married. Okay, well, I'll get married then. And that's what I did,
Oh, so you
to the first gentleman who asked me to get married.
not not
Yes,
not
I'll let you take it from there.
not Naya's dad.
Not Naya's daddy.
Okay.
Nope.
Okay.
So I wrapped up my 20s for you. So I'm 29 when I got
And you
married.
got married. I actually I
Yes.
was about the same age when I got married. I was about the same age. Well, actually, I was around that age when I had my son. But so you get married out
Yep.
of kind of like following the path, not necessarily out of that's what I want to do. Okay.
Right. So, hopefully people are, very intrigued now to how I still can smile through all of this stuff.
Correct.
But the whole point of, I believe, my book is dealing with the hand I was dealt, is this moment right here. The gentleman, again, if anybody ever hears these stories, I try to talk about them
Uh-huh.
in a light and not a dark,
Okay.
because I don't believe that there's anywhere in my life that God has made a mistake,
Okay.
which means that they were not mistakes in my life.
Correct.
And God had to really bring me to that place. That wasn't an easy place to be. But the word tells us that a righteous man's steps are ordered by the Lord. And it also tells us all things will work together for the good of those that love the Lord and are called according to his purpose.
Correct.
So that means that whether we dated and it ended in wonderful bliss, or we dated and it ended very bad,
Right.
for some reason we crossed paths. But I can undoubtedly say why I crossed my ex, now ex-husband's path,
Okay.
was because when he asked me to marry him, someone had told me I was going to marry a man with his name. So keep that in mind. God told me to tell you that your
Okay.
husband's name is, and I said, okay. So the first man that came along, that's my husband. He asked
Right.
me on the second day, it's such a fairy tale. Why would I not say yes?
So you 2 days
No one
into
had
knowing
ever
this,
talked. 2 days.
brother, and he
Two
asked
days.
you to be his lady, and he put that ring on
Yep.
your finger.
Well, he didn't have a ring, but
Okay.
he did. He got down on his knee, and it was in gravel. So we were standing in my mom's front yard. We had just
Okay.
left church. It was a fantasy. It was a fairy tale. Literally, you
Okay.
meet somebody on a Friday. We went out on Saturday. We took my Naya and his kid, two kids. He had a boy and a girl. And that Sunday, we went downtown, walked around. It was blissful. That's
Uh-huh.
all I can tell you.
Right.
We was floating on a cloud.
Right.
And so when we got out of church, and he got on his knee, I never told him about said prophecy or nothing.
Okay.
And so he gets on his knee. He says, I want to marry you. You're going to be my wife. Will you be my wife? Sure.
Sure. Let's
Now
do
he
it.
can rescue me from this rhetoric of Brandy, the only one don't get going to get married. My sister was married by now, and my brother. So let
Oh
me
wow.
also add that
Okay.
in. My sister and brother were married. So here I am out here frolicking in the streets, minding my own business, taking care of my child the best way I know how, but not married. And so here I am saying, yes, I'll marry you.
Right.
So he did give me a ring about 3 months later.
Okay.
And then we got
Y'all
married
got
in
married.
June,
Okay.
the same month that my father had passed away.
Hmm.
Because again, in my mind, I will put something happy where I had something sad.
Okay.
Remember high school?
Right.
So remember, I did cheerleading. So here's the lesson, people. Don't put something in the void, deal with the void.
Do it with the void. Correct.
Yes, because if you don't deal with the void, just putting something new there does not eliminate the fact that it actually hurts.
Correct. Just gonna
We
move
have to
on.
get down into why it hurts and try to heal it to some degree. So ended up getting a divorce. So now what I put
How
there
long were you
as
married?
my happy place, 1 year.
Oh, 1 year. Okay. That was short.
Yeah,
That was short.
that's all. But here is the why I know he was supposed to be in my life. And again, I tread lightly when I say this. However, this is my story, and I've decided to tell it
Hmm.
in its
I'm
entirety.
glad you're willing to talk about it.
So, well, thank you. It takes a lot. I mean, it's the truth is written in the book, but sometimes when you're talking it, people hear different podcasts and stuff, and they run back and say I said
Right.
stuff, and I'd be like, no, let me tell you what I said and why I said it.
Right.
But it's what happened, and I think he's happily married now. And this was 11 years ago, But nevertheless, for women who are listening to this, who may be in relationships, not even abusive relationships,
Right.
but where you feel like you're being forced to be there,
Mm.
and it's not by choice. So my whole entire life, if you listen to the story, I always felt like I was doing things by force. I got married by force.
Right.
Even it was a spiritual force. It was God said do this. God said you should be married. Um, you should keep the baby because God said so.
Right.
Not saying it was wrong. I'm just saying I never got to be a part of the choosing process. It was just like, here is your book of life,
Right.
and this is what you're supposed to live. And I didn't know how to make choices.
Right.
Even with dating, it was like, well, you're single black mom, so no one's gonna want you. I
Okay.
remember people telling me that.
Okay.
And I still hear that to this day. And I'm thinking single black women, mothers get married every day.
Right.
But it's just rhetoric that keeps
Keep
spewing
spewing.
all over the place.
Yeah.
So, long story short, I end up in a domestic violence shelter.
Oh wow.
And this is where God came to me and told me that I would go around the world telling my story.
Mm-hmm.
God came to me. He didn't send a person. I was sitting in a box about 4x4 with 4 bunk beds in it, and 2 other girls. And I remember just journaling because I always like writing and stuff.
Correct.
And I was reading the Bible. I heard it so clearly. When you get out of here, you're going to tell your story to the world. And I was like, what story? And there went me and God's relationship jailed. And back up to when I got there to the in the office, the lady asked me, "Where's your father?" And I said, "What does my father have to do with this man putting his hands on me?"
Right.
And she said, "Well, you could be looking for the love of your father." And that was 12 years ago. And that's why I said I don't think that would have happened had I went another route, had life took me another way. And so this entire time, and I put this in the book, she said to me, "You've been dating the same man
Uh-huh.
over and over. He just had different names."
Right.
I could have threw my shoe at that lady.
Mm-hmm.
I'm 30 years old, and nobody ever told me
Right.
that you really don't even like these guys. And they were right,
Right.
but I didn't know why I didn't like them. I was just allowing them to be around me. It was just something about
Wow.
them that said, you can be here. Even though I had a disdain for you, like
Right.
something about you aggravates me,
Right.
but something about you I like. And you leaving traumatizes me all over again.
Right.
So what the therapist ended up telling me is that them being there provides some kind of safety and security.
Security.
They've either promised to never leave you, maybe they buy you a lot of gifts, which we know now to be called love bombing.
Right.
We have all these technical words for this stuff now,
Right.
but it was literally like the sky opened up.
Mm.
And so I tell people I don't have any shame about it because we all have our cross to bear, and
Correct.
these are mine. I made a lot of different decisions, but I've never made a mistake because everything that I've done in my lifetime was not necessarily wrong. Maybe it didn't end the way that I wanted it to.
Right.
And Lord knows, staying in a domestic violence shelter for 2 months because they don't
Two
let you
months.
out. I
Oh, they
said I
don't
had to
let you
stay for
out.
2 months straight.
Now,
No,
was your daughter with you? She wasn't
and
with you, right?
nope. I left her with my best friend at the time,
Okay.
and that was very hard. Very
Of
hard.
course.
Not only did I leave her, I lost my car because my husband didn't pay the title loan on it. I didn't know we had a title loan,
Right.
but he didn't pay the title loan. I was at the gas station, and they picked the car up.
Wow.
And then the police picked me up from my best friend's house because I had already agreed to go to get help, like housing and stuff. And it was a
It's a
well
whirlwind.
orchestrated transformation by God.
Right. Right. And so,
He took everything
but
from me.
throughout this process, I mean, I've heard you mention God earlier on in the conversation. I was going to get to that. Where was that introduction at? I mean, you're in South Carolina. That's considered the Bible Belt. Um,
Um, Go ahead.
now, where was that introduction to religion and your belief?
Forever. My mom plays the piano, so I've been
Okay.
in church since I was in the womb.
Okay. Oh,
I
oh, wow.
was
Yeah.
consecrated at 12. My whole family sings. When I say they can sing, they
They
sang.
sang S A
I've
N G.
always been in, yeah, AANG.
Okay.
I've always been in church,
Okay.
and I always known that God was with me. I may not have always been with Him, and we collided paths. And I don't believe He was willing to let me go this time.
Okay.
I think that time He was like, "All right, I got you, and we gonna do this together."
Okay.
And I just remember the women would come in and be like, "Can you teach me about your God?" You know how they'll say, people will ask you about your God. I never went in there preaching. I went in with my head down.
Uh-huh.
I was full of embarrassment and shame.
Right.
I didn't even want nobody to know who I was.
Correct.
Um, and I remember this one young lady. We rode to the grocery store together, and she said, "Can you help get me saved?" That's how she said it. And I said, "You mean you want me to walk you through the prayer of salvation?" And she was like, "Yeah, I wanna be like you. Like, you don't act like you're in a domestic violence shelter. You act like you have hope.
Uh-huh.
Like there's a tomorrow for you."
Right.
Man, when I say I understood Paul and Silas and them in jail, and
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
understood
Martin.
why God would take me this way. Not that my actions were ever perfect. I have
Correct.
plenty of wrongdoing.
Correct.
I just ain't never made a mistake.
Right.
And so I said, I'll do it when we get back to the shelter. And I heard the Holy Spirit say, "What if you don't make it back to the shelter?"
Do it now.
I was like, "Oh, you're real." So when you ask me, so when did it come? I believe that I had always kind of been hearing it, but I was kind of pushing it away because you'll hear people say, "Well, nobody hears from God."
Right.
You can't tell me what I heard. I know the difference between what I would say and the difference between what the Holy Spirit would say.
Right.
Because surely I was getting ready to do it back. But I think He took that moment to tell me, even in my darkest hour, even when I couldn't figure life out, and things are going left and right,
Right.
that He would use the moment. And a lady was going to commit suicide. They ran in my
Wow.
room and got me, and they were like, "Brandy, we need you to come pray for this lady." And I did not want to do it, Daryl. I did not want to do it
No, because
because nobody said
it was new to you, right?
no, because nobody saved my daddy.
Because no, you said
And God said,
no one saved your dad.
yeah, because nobody saved my dad. That's what I told God. I said, "You're going to have me pray for someone to not commit suicide when nobody was there to save my dad."
Right. This is that
And
same.
God spoke to me. I promise you, He said, "I was there." And I was like, "All right, let's do it." It was like I've always been in church, but the church ain't always been in me.
Right.
Amen.
Right.
But
Right.
I just remember those little moments where God's like, "You've been taught that God was this really big, nasty, mean God, and He kills people."
Right.
That basically summed up how we were taught about salvation and relationship with God. And God's like, "No, you can talk to me and I'll talk back to you.
Right.
You can ask me, should I date this person or not date this person? You can say no." Creating boundaries and all of that stuff came with a
Very
heavy
important.
price, especially when God tell you, "No, not." I'd be like, "But I like him. I like that one," and God be like, "Come on back, come
Right.
on back."
Right. Right. Wow. Wow. So you in the shelter. 2 months go by. You finally get out. Then you
Yes.
is that when you start working on your book?
No, actually, when I got out the shelter, I got my daughter back about maybe 3 or 4 weeks, and it was about 2014. So I got out the shelter in 2012.
Okay.
And so it wasn't until 2014 when I went back to Fayetteville. Excuse me, let me back up. I had a dream that I woke up in a library, and it was a library full of books like the one behind me. And I said, "Whose books are
Uh
these?"
huh.
And I heard a voice say, "They're yours." And I said, "Oh, I must live in a mansion," because they were
Uh
everywhere.
huh.
And so when I woke up, I said it audibly. I was like, "Huh." That was a big house. Whose books were those? And I heard God say, they're yours. You wrote them. And I was like, oh, what? And I said, I ain't playing these games with you, God. I got stuff to do.
Right.
Because by now I'm better. I'm an actress now.
Right.
I got a name for myself. I didn't left old boy.
Right. Right. Right.
I'm on a good path.
Right.
I don't need to have to sit down and write nobody books.
Right. I do.
Then I went to a dance conference because I just switched partners. Amen. I stopped dancing in the world and I started dancing at church.
Okay.
And so we had a dance conference at church and the lady had wrote a book. And so I was like, oh, I'm going to ask her if I can get her information. Well, I didn't even have to because she was having a class on how to publish books.
Wow.
So it was a no brainer. I signed up for her class because that dream was literally so clear. I said, well, I guess I got to start somewhere because I was tired of fighting with God.
Right.
Remember the domestic violence shelter? I wasn't even going that route. I said, all right, God, you want me to write books? Let's do it.
Right.
These dictionaries, encyclopedias, we about to put them to use. So
Yeah, you started young. You
there
started
was
young with words.
right. There was a women's conference in Fayetteville that my mom's church was going to, and she asked me if I wanted to go. So I went.
Uh-huh.
So we get there, and I had this feeling of somberness, like I wanted to cry.
Mm-hmm.
But I hadn't been there in years, so I have no connection to the city.
Right.
But then I look over and my mom about to cry, my sister about to cry, and I'm like, why are y'all
Why
crying?
y'all crying?
And it was almost like maybe my father's spirit had accompanied us and we were just feeling the loss. But you're talking about 2012, 2013.
Right.
So my mom looks over and says, I stayed at that hospital. It was a mental hospital. And she's okay with me sharing this information, by
Okay.
the way,
Okay.
because I tell her that I
Now,
think it's important for people
is
to
this in the
understand.
book?
Huh?
I said, is this part in the book?
No,
It's bonus
but
material.
it will be in my next.
So this is bonus
Yes.
material.
So yes, it's bonus material. So my mom had been depressed since I was 8, and I never knew.
Wow.
Never knew the signs, any of that. So my advice to anyone who is dealing with something, you don't want to tell your kids, of course, but as they get older, so that they'll know these are some of the signs that you're going to
Mm-hmm.
also have. So I have already had the conversation with my daughter. When you feel, like you about down in the dumps and things like that, because generational curses are what they are
Right.
until we break them and create the blessing part.
Right.
But it's not, it doesn't have to be so crazy. It doesn't have to be, what's a good word? It doesn't have to be so just a tough conversation. It's
Right.
just what it is. Hey,
It is what it
I
is.
was diagnosed with this,
Right.
and I don't want you to have to struggle the way I struggled with depression
Correct.
because I didn't know what it was.
Correct.
If my mom had said, this is what it is, and I've already struggled since the 80s, and I also believe now that's why she wouldn't let them give me medicine because she already had it
Wow.
and she knew the effects of it, and she would rather to save me from it.
Right.
So we get up there, and so we get to the conference,
There's a lot going
and this
on.
lady says, yeah, God said to write the book. No, she said, God said, do the first thing he told you to do. And I was like, the first thing he told me to do.
Well, you did. You got.
That's not a good prophecy. That don't say nothing.
Right.
And so I was like, okay. So I go back home and I pull out my journal to start writing the book that I thought I was going to write, which was a prayer journal for my husband, my then husband.
I was about
I
to
was
say
going to write a book about.
by this time he's gone.
Well, he was ish. We were trying to semi work it out.
Okay.
And so it was about Christian wives praying for their husband. Real simple. So we were going through the divorce part, but we weren't divorced quite yet.
Okay.
So I wanted to write a Christian, from a Christian wife's perspective on how to pray for your husband.
Okay.
Well, she said, go back and do the thing that God told you to do the first time. And I was like, okay. So I pull out my journal for that book, and the Holy Spirit said, that's not the first book I told you to write. And I was like, okay. Well, I also remember that she told me to clean out my closet. So I went to go clean out my closet
Okay.
because I'm like, well, maybe I'll find clues in here. God be like Blue's Clues sometimes.
Right. Right.
I'm like, all right, what's the clue for today?
Right.
And so I was going through pictures and stuff like that, and I started to tear up when I found some pictures of, I think it was my dad,
Mm.
my ex, just stuff like that. And I said, I don't want to deal with this no more.
Uh-huh.
And it dropped in my spirit, dealing with the hand I was dealt. He had gave that to me when Naya was like 4 or 5. When I was driving down the highway, I thought it was going to be like a play.
Uh-huh.
And so I had just put it on my mental shelf.
Right.
And so here we are almost 10 years later, dealing with the hand I was dealt. I said, God, you're gonna make me tell my whole life story.
Right.
Because it say dealing with the hand I was dealt.
Right.
And so in the book I talk about
You.
how I addressed each of those issues, how I forgave people, how I forgave myself,
Mm-hmm.
how I forgave my circle of adults who I felt like misdirected me,
Correct.
how I put a lot of colorfulness in there. I can't, let it go without all the juicy details are
Right.
in
Right.
there
No, no,
about
no.
all
I
my
got it.
life and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah. So now let me ask you, in writing the book, was it healing for you? Do you feel like up until that point you weren't completely healed, and how healing was it for you to write that book? Because you, like you said, it was a self-examination, and a lot of people don't understand when you write. I'm not too sure whatever you write, but I know when you write things that are near and dear to you, it kind of takes something out of you.
Absolutely. So for me, it was healing places I didn't know it was healing. So I'm
Mm.
just writing it because God told me to. And when I'm done with it, it can be gone and I'm going to go back to doing what I'm doing. That's not what was about to happen. That's what
Nah,
happened in
that
my
ain't how it
head.
works.
But what
That ain't how it
happened is,
works.
as I would cry so hard, Daryl. It would be so crazy. I couldn't even get through a page
Right.
without tearing up again. And I was like, God, I can't write the book if I cry through the whole thing. And he said, well, why don't you take your own advice? And my advice was cry
Uh huh.
anyway.
Right.
Cry, because if you don't cry it out, it's still in there.
Right.
Because remember, we have kept babysitting and putting a band-aid
Mm-hmm.
on that void.
Mm-hmm.
And he said the reason why it still hurts is because you keep trying to avoid the pain. Sit with the pain and talk to it
Right.
and allow it to leave you. Allow it to process itself through your body
Correct.
as an experience that you have. You've already walked yourself through forgiveness. You've already walked yourself through the verbal forgiveness. Now do the heart forgiveness of detaching yourself from whatever you thought life should have been.
Right.
Well, I should have got married before I had Naya, because of course that's the narrative. I should have gotten married to a great rich man who would take care of me and I could have been a stay-at-home wife. That would have been great too.
Right.
None of those are my narratives. But if I attach myself to what should have been, I will regret my entire life.
Right.
And that's not God's will. The other part was the shame that went with it.
Mm.
Now I got to go
Talk
out here and
about it.
tell people that the good Christian version of me ain't always been so good and Christian.
Right.
I got to go out here and tell people that I was slipping and dipping and dancing on the bar downtown. I got to go out here and tell
Right.
people about all the nasty parts of my life.
Right.
What are they going to say?
Right.
And he said, well, it doesn't matter because what I said about you matters.
Right.
And if we can ever get to that place, what another person says about you really doesn't
Don't
matter. That's
matter.
their opinion and we don't let them have it. But a lot of our family, so my family, and praise God if y'all on here, they already know how I feel about them.
Right.
They're very judgmental. Not that they don't have their own issues, they're just so verbally want to address every single problem
Right.
as if they're perfect.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we do it as a community and as a society. I'm I got it all together. Got this beautiful background. That ain't really my background. It's just a nice background.
Right.
But let's just say this was my house. This is mine, and you're over there in
Right.
your little square box. That's what God blessed them with. Some people can be the happiest in something smaller. I tell people this all the time. People get mad at me because I win with less cards in my hand.
Right.
I don't have all the money I don't have the biggest podcast. I didn't write the bestseller that hit the New York bestsellers list yet.
Right.
But I win with less cards in my hand because the joy of the Lord is my strength,
Right.
not what man or woman has to say about me. But had I not wrote that book, I would not be where I am today. I would not have the deliverance that I have. I would not have been able to stand up in pulpits as regular old with my shoulder out, Brandy.
Right.
I'm not showing up like the first lady.
Right.
I'm not showing up looking like the average church member, but somebody here invited me
Right.
and they knew that what I was going to look like when I got here. God sent me to break
Right.
stereotypes. He sent me to set the captives free. So I can't act like the captives when I get
No,
there.
no, no,
And
no.
people would be so nasty to me.
You, you know, it's funny, Brandy, where you're going right now, and you talk about the obedience, which is what you're really talking about. You're getting into obedience now, and so, um, one, I don't even like to read. Not that I can't, but I don't like to read. So writing is like, nah, I'm not doing that because then I got to read it, right? Or act like I
Right.
read it, right? And like you said, it pulls out your things about you, your hidden secrets and things. And what I like about where you're going with this thing and where you went is that I can relate, and I'm sure people that watch this will be able to relate, and more importantly, they'll be released to be
Yes.
what people keep talking about now is your true authentic self. Well, in order to do that, you have to be able to look in that mirror. And writing has
Yeah.
done that for me. It's forced me to look in that mirror longer than I probably would have wanted to. And it sounds like to
Right.
me that you've had to look in that mirror longer than what you probably would have wanted to. And you didn't have to write the book, like you say. People call me all the time. They say, "Dear, how's your book doing?" I say, "It wasn't for that. It wasn't for that."
Right.
And the next book I'm writing is not for that either. So I really appreciate you sharing that so much of yourself, so much of the you, and that bonus material as well.
Right. Amen. You're so welcome. Well, the older I get, and for those who are watching, you probably figured if I say my daughter is 23, that means I got to be somewhere close to 40 or over 40. So I am 43,
Right.
and every day I look in the mirror, and for one, I thank God that I don't look like what I've been through.
Correct.
Amen.
Right.
Because the days that I cried just because the agreement with me and God was if I gotta cry it out, I'll cry it out. But what I'm not gonna do is put a void filler in it.
Right.
If I have to lay in the floor, if I gotta kick and scream, because it really does hurt. When people say their heart, their heart is broken, they really can feel it inside of their body.
Right.
They used to call me the sensitive one. My mom would be like, "You're so sensitive." And God finally told me that that's a gift I gave you so that you can relate to people
Right.
because we live in a world that's so cold.
Hmm.
People are so cold and they're so cold hearted.
Right.
And as a kid, I used to be like, thinking that was a bad thing because they would be like, "You're so sensitive. Why are you always crying?" So I stopped crying
Right.
and I started holding it in, and crying became anger, and it was like I would just hold it all in. And God's like, don't you don't." God gave me permission to be free. He gave me permission to be me, but even amongst other people,
Right.
like if I get teary eyed, I used to try to close my eyes, or
Right.
he's like, you don't have to do all that because authenticity don't try to hide nothing.
Correct.
Now, transparency is what I mean. I'm transparent because I have a 23-year-old. They can see straight through this crap.
Right.
They can see straight through us. And if I try to raise my child and be fake like the generation behind us,
Correct.
we not going. These kids are going to be gone.
Yeah.
They're going to go do whatever they want to
Right.
do, however they want to do
Right.
it, and we're going to be the generation to help guide them to some degree. We have to be able to sit down and talk to them and not judge them on sight.
Right.
Amen.
Right.
We not that we're not judging them internally. I tell my daughter that all the time. Inside, I'm asking many questions,
Right.
but I'm not going to tell you who you should date, who you should marry. You should do this because you're tall, dark, and handsome. You should be with this person and have this job.
Uh-huh.
That's what's wrong with our society now. There's such a huge list of shoulds, but what God showed me was that relationships don't fail, people do.
Correct.
Relationships build and build and build, and we love each other and we grow together. And will we argue sometimes? Sure. Will we disagree? Absolutely. But that doesn't remove my love from you. And that's what I didn't know about God. I saw God as this huge judgmental person because that's who was in
That's
my
that's what
family.
was judged.
And God's like, no, I'm not judging you for the sake of torturing you. I'm trying to get you to make different decisions for a better outcome. So when you're dealing with the hand that you're dealt, when you finally look in the mirror and say, okay, Brandy, did you really want to date this person,
Right.
or were you trying to fill a void?
Right.
You stay home that. Did you really have to say what you said, or were you trying to get somebody back because you really feel that in your own spirit?
Right.
Okay, be quiet. Just you begin to check
Check
yourself
yourself.
before you wreck yourself.
Right.
Amen.
Right. Right.
Amen,
Right.
church. You check yourself
About
before
90.
you wreck
Was
yourself.
that
And
90? What's
you
that about 99, 1990, 92? You running
yeah,
back to right now?
yeah. And so that's why I'm the coolest, because yes, I know scriptures, I know rap songs, I like the opera, I'm very multifunctional,
Okay.
and that's all because I operate on both my left and right brain.
Right.
And so with dealing with the hand that was dealt, we had to remember that God gave us these cards. I know people don't want to admit that. Well, you chose it. Yes, I did, but God could have also stopped it just like he stopped other things.
Right.
So if he allowed it, he must have known that there was an outcome that I didn't know.
Right.
And it does say that there is a way that seems right to a man, and in the end God will have his way. So are there times that we pick paths that God is like, we really didn't have to go the long way this time, but since you want to do the long way, I got the long way for you.
Right.
Because it also says I put two options before you. I think it says I put before you life and death, choose life.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're dealing with our new hand, and we're taking the cards that were dealt to us, we say, okay, all right, I got rape and molestation, but I don't have to use those cards
Right.
anymore. I can turn the, what is it, spades, where you can turn in the card and get a new card, or tonk,
Right. Right.
one of them.
Right.
Remember I went to school up the hill, so I don't really know card games like that. Anybody want to ever teach me, I'd be happy to learn. But it's funny, even with that, I didn't play spades. And here God giving me a whole analogy about a poker game that I've never even played.
Right. Right. So let me ask you a question. In dealing with, I heard you mention about those that kind of misled you, misguided you. I write about, in my new book, I write about this because that generation, your mother, my mother, your father, my father, that was a very, the crack epidemic, the whole breaking up of the family, all those kind of things was going on. How long did it take, and how much blame did you give them with with and without understanding of the era they were in?
I would probably say, now knowing the mental health side of it
Hmm.
and the financial strain that they had. So let me answer the question directly. I blamed them till I wrote the book.
Okay.
So till I was about 30.
Okay.
Because when I ended up writing the book, I had to research stuff like PTSD,
Correct.
anxiety, because I talk about, and I'm just now getting my degree. Well, I'm still in school now to be a mental health therapist,
Okay.
but I'm about to be 43. So I just started digging way deep for school purposes.
Okay.
But God had me studying this stuff 12 years ago when I was trying to figure out, why my husband acting like this. Google, what is going on
Right.
when I say this and he says
Right.
this,
Right.
and I'm learning all of these terminologies. But when I found out that my mom had depression, I went and studied it. And what was depression like in the 80s?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I studied. Even my sister had depression, um, and I said, well, if my sister got it and my mama got it, then don't I got it?
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
So then I went to the doctor, and the doctor said you probably had it worse when you had your child. And I said, that would make sense. Remember, I kept saying I didn't want a kid.
Right,
And I was really for real about that. I
right,
would give her to her dad for weeks at a time.
right,
I'd be like, hey, you want your kid? I don't really know what to do with her next. I didn't have no bonding agent.
right,
And I tell people postpartum depression is literally depression. It's not that I didn't love her. I did love her, but it was like you hear moms say stuff like, oh, I just sat with my baby all day and we just cuddled. And I'm thinking, I don't feel it. So there must be something wrong with
right,
me.
right,
But when he gets her, he would feel all the feels. And I'm like, it's got to be me then.
right,
I must be cursed because I said I didn't want a baby. Now God is cursing me to not feel it. And
right,
I would let her go places. And she knows this whole story. I actually sat down and talked to her before I published the book, so that when she read it and people came back to her and went, yeah, mama don't want
right,
you,
right, right.
she would have some.
Some clarity,
And then
some
you'll know
understanding.
that exactly what I said what happened happened. Somebody came back to her and was like, did you read your mama book? And she said, yes, I did. I let her read everything that was PG-13.
Correct.
I told her she could read it when she turned 18, and she read the whole thing when she turned 18. We had a very hard cry and a good laugh
Uh-huh.
on some of it. She was there. She remembers part of the stories, and she'd be like, oh, I didn't know that's what was going on. I'm like, I couldn't tell you. It's 12,
Right, right.
but you're 23 now.
Correct.
What would you like to talk about?
Right.
And the only reason I'm willing to talk about it is so that you don't make the same
Correct.
mistakes.
Correct.
I just don't want you to. We've had to forgive each other. There were times that I could say I dated some people that I should not have.
Correct.
I could have dealt without it because it really did a mental job on me.
Okay.
So it really drained me mentally
Okay.
and took me away from being a great mom because I'm in the room crying because they didn't come home or they didn't call me,
Right.
or I'm grieving and groveling over
Right.
my father not being here,
Right.
but here present in the form of a man.
Right. 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 Well, like I said, Brandy,
So when you hear kids saying, huh?
like I said, I mean, I hear similar stories, but not everybody's willing to talk about it. And that's what makes this so special that one, you put it in writing. All right. So you can help someone else. You sat your daughter down, discuss these things with her, and you're willing to still come here live on a book you wrote 2014 and still talk about it. To me, that's confirmation that, hey, I'm over it. I'm over that. That part of me is long gone. It is what it is. I've moved on. I always tell people, well, if you can't talk about it, you must still be dealing with it.
Right. Well, and it's very hard if you see. That's why I'm a life coach now, because in God and all His infinite ways knew that my path was going to change. He told me in that shelter that I would go tell my story. And after I published the book, then people call me and say, hey, can you come and speak to our women's group? Well, after I spoke to the women's group, the women will be like, can I call you? I'm trying to leave my boyfriend, or I need a better
Whoa, whoa, whoa,
relationship
whoa,
with my
wait, hold up
family.
now. Hold up now, Brandy. Wait a minute now. Wait a minute now.
What happened?
You now I know you ain't man bashing now. You did leave that son of a
No,
leave that dude now. Get him. Oh, okay,
no,
okay, okay, okay. I'm making sure you ain't man.
no, I never bet. No,
I'm making sure you ain't
there's
man.
just some relationships you just know you don't belong in.
Okay, okay,
Let's just say that.
okay,
They will tell me, hey, so here, full disclosure, I am an equal opportunist.
okay.
I think that relationships are a beautiful thing with the right people,
Mm-hmm.
and I think that some people stay too long. And I will listen, to both sides. I've done couples counseling. I've done same sex counseling. I'll counsel whoever needs counseling
Okay.
because ultimately, love is love to me. I am not here to judge you. I am here to show you what a healthy relationship looks like. That is my only goal in life.
Okay.
And so when they would, so I talk about domestic violence and abuse and things. I don't use words like narcissist and stuff like that in
Right.
my book
Right.
because you're talking about 10 years ago. That really
It
wasn't a
wasn't even a
thing.
word.
But
Right.
I do talk right. But human behavior,
Correct.
no matter what you identify as.
Right.
If if I yell and cuss at you and manipulate you, manipulation is manipulation, whether it's coming out of male or
Right.
female. Um, whatever you identify as, manipulation is manipulation. So I chose to be a behavior analyst versus a people analyst
Okay.
because I can't tell you about all black men or all black women
Okay.
or all white men,
Correct.
but I can tell you what kind of behavior will create a loving relationship and what kind of behavior is going to create a rocky relationship.
That's very
And so,
important.
yes, women will pull me aside, huh?
Yeah, no, that's very important the way you put that out. And the reason why I say that is simply because of this. Now I knew you weren't male bashing. I'm just messing with you. So you study the behavior. Let's say a woman comes to you and her husband has been doing whatever said behavior that you would say is that type of behavior is you need to get up out of there. Is it just get up out of there, or is it something to correct first? Is there a
So
solution there, or the only solution is you got to get up out of there? He ain't gonna change. He been doing that, and he gonna keep doing that.
I don't tell people to leave. I don't because I don't believe there's a should list, like the little engine that
Uh
should.
huh.
You get to determine what's best for your life. And if staying is what you want to do, you do it.
Right.
Or if leaving, because remember, I was stuck in a world where people always told me what to do and they never showed me how to make decisions.
Correct.
They never showed me how to weigh the odds and look and analyze. And I learned that on my own. And so I don't tell people to leave unless there is a possibility of death or dismemberment.
Mm.
So if you have already been attacked, you've been locked in a closet, and that's on both ends. I want to say that I am not like, oh, men get traumatized by women all the time.
Right.
So in a case where she didn't slap something up against your head, yes.
Yeah. Right.
But I don't have to tell somebody like that to leave. You already knew you should have
Right.
left. I think how do I leave and keep my life is the question there. I don't think people really ask me, should I leave? At that point, it's how do I leave? I also worked at a domestic violence shelter years later because God always brings me full circle.
Correct.
And I've watched women come in and out, come into the shelter and go back to their abuser. And so but we were not allowed to tell them not to go back. And so I agree. I can't tell you what to do, but give me a little bit easier scenario. So let's just say he's staying out all night. He's staying out every night
Uh huh.
and he's not telling her when he's coming home.
Correct.
That's an easier one.
What,
So
what would you say in
what
that?
I would
Because I've
suggest,
done that.
I
I'm
would
guilty of that.
so I would first ask if so we're gonna say they're dating. They're not married, they're dating. I would ask my first order of business is always to have an open a conversation. Have you told him that it bothers you?
Correct.
And if she says yeah and he's not listening, then my second is, well, then why are you still there? Is it worth fighting for? Is it worth staying up all night? Or would you like to leave and go be with someone else who will come home at night when you would like them to? However, if you're not married, you're under no obligation to make all of these sacrifices.
Right.
So if this was an agreement, I won't stay out all night, or whatever the agreement was, and they're breaking the verbal agreement, then it's just a conversation. Hey, it really bothers me when you don't come in. Can you text me at least when you're not coming home?
Right.
And if he says something like, well, you can't control me, I'm a grown
Big
man,
word.
please understand that that's what he meant. Now you got to decide, do you want to be in a relationship with someone who is not communicative with you, or do you want to pack your bags and go?
Right.
Women have a hard time making that decision because 9 times out of 10, you've been together for 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Uh-huh.
You've given your all and your everything. And now you want to have these hard lines in the sand when dating is dating.
Right.
Living together is living together.
Right.
You're still not married. And if you were getting married, you probably would have had this conversation already. Hey, now that we're married, we're not going to do this the stay out all night thing like we used to do when we was dating.
Right.
I think that people get married under assumption sometimes. Well, I just assumed because you didn't do it back then that you wouldn't do it now.
Right.
So my advice is something like that. I used to ask myself, because I think I asked myself, I asked this guy, well, why do you XYZ? And then I said, you know what, Brandy? Why do you allow it?
Right.
Why are you still
Why are
here?
you allowing it?
If you don't like it, there is the door. You're not married. And even when I was married, I found the door.
Right.
And so here's the thing. We don't have to fight and argue about everything.
Right.
We can just talk. Hey, this really bothers me. Like I remember one guy would get ghosts for like 3 days. And we were dating. I'm talking about 2 years in.
Uh-huh.
And he would go 3 days without coming by, calling.
Oh, wow.
And that really traumatized. This was before I wrote the book.
Right.
So remember my dad not coming back.
Right.
That made those feelings resurface. So I always tell people, you think it's the person that's in front of you that's making you feel this way, but it's really not. It's something else that you've experienced that left this hole in your soul, and you're blaming it on that person.
Right.
It's just like if I heard that all bald head men with white t-shirts was going to be mean to me, how would I treat you?
Right.
I would have just stereotyped you for no reason,
Right.
just because I heard. But what if I also heard that bald head man with the, white t-shirt on and the chain was the most loving in the world?
Right.
Then, not even knowing you, I would give you all the grace and passion and everything simply because inside I've internalized who you are.
Correct.
Instead of just letting you be who you are and then getting to know that person.
Right.
So we brought all of these experiences with us to these relationships, and that's why we're traumatizing each other.
Right.
Because you don't want to get to know the person across from you. Well, women don't want that,
Right.
and men don't want that. You dated all the men and women of the world.
Right.
Even if you've dated a lot of them, you really still can't say what that person in front of you wants, needs, or desires until they say it out of your mouth. And nobody wants to do that because that's where the work begins.
Right. 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 No, you're right. You're right in saying that. Now, let me ask you this, Brandy. What are you most passionate about now these days?
I am most passionate about sleeping, rest. I am passionate about seeing people, one, be healthy, healed, and whole internally. So, not moved and swayed by every conversation, internal or external. I
Mm-hmm.
think we have some negative internal conversations. So, I'm passionate about seeing the younger generation and what they're going to bring to the next 10 years. And I'm definitely passionate about graduating as a mental and behavioral health therapist within, I think I have 12 more months, 12 or 14 more
Okay.
months. And I'm passionate about really just helping other people pursue their passions and cross the finish line, especially if I know their backstory, like where they were struggling. And when they finally hit their stride and they let that stuff go and they forgive people and they call me, they're like, I finally did it. I finally wrote my book,
Right.
or I finally forgave such and such. People will tell me, I'm never going to do that. I'm never going to forgive somebody. And then they'll call me and be like, hey, I thought about what you said and it worked. And so I'm just passionate about where God has taken me in my life, because I know if I came through the hard stuff, and it was some hard stuff,
Right.
and I made it this far,
Right.
that what I have now and what I know now and the healing that I've gone through now, I can't imagine what the next 10 years is going to be.
You've been prepared. You've
Yes,
been prepared.
absolutely.
Now, you mentioned people call
I've
you.
been
You mentioned people call you And I know you still have your publishing company.
Yes.
You mentioned you speak on occasions, places. So just tell me real quick, how can people get in touch with you?
Okay, so on social media, I am author Brandy Hunt on Facebook and Instagram, and I believe on LinkedIn too. And on TikTok, I am Dr. Brandy Hunt. And if you want to email me, you can email me at publish, PUBLISH, the letter U00 at gmail.com.
Okay, okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure some people will be getting at you for that. That's great. That's great. So, what would Brandy's older self right now tell her younger self?
Ooh, I do this often. I put this in my journal. And what I would tell my younger self is it really is going to be okay, and not to waste so much time looking for validation and explaining yourself. They'll figure it out as you move along in life. I think I spent a lot of time trying to convince people that God was with me and that God had told me to do certain things, and they didn't trust me, and I would not either not do it or half do it because I'm like, well, no one supported me or no one pushed me. And God's like, me and you are the majority. And so that's what I would tell my younger self is don't go chasing all of these pieces of validation. You really are a whole person,
Right,
and you can be whole by yourself until another whole individual comes beside you, and you don't have to go through all of this heartbreak to try to find yourself, and you still end up losing yourself.
right. Wow, that's a big
That's
deal.
what I would say.
That's a big deal. That's a good word. I mean, that's a good word for some people, especially I'm thinking of my daughters, 17 and 20, be 21 in a few days. Even my son, that's a good word for all of them, especially with the dynamics of this generation going back and forth. So Ben, when you're not studying, when you're not in school, you're not speaking, writing, mentoring, doing all these things, mothering, you know, what does Brandy like to do in her spare time?
So, in the 20 minutes that's left over after I've done all of those
Yeah.
things, no, I actually love to, I love museums.
Okay.
So I like going to, I got a chance to go to Kobe's museum, and I've been to like some of the presidential museums, and I just really like looking at historical things. I love parks. So any kind of park, whether you can walk through it or rollerblade through it, but I love nature. I like hiking.
Mhm.
I got hurt last year, so I can't hike yet. I'm almost there.
Okay.
I like biking. So anything adventurous, because I do spend a lot of time on the computer and with my head down. So whenever I can get out, I do like to do things that are adventurous. My daughter took me zip lining
Oh,
one
that's
year,
nice.
for my, yeah, actually in North Carolina, in Charlotte.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think I
so
know what that
it
spot is.
was
Is
fun.
that the water raft, whitewater park or something?
Yes,
Okay.
yep, yep.
Okay.
We jumped off of the 100-foot tower.
Wow.
Yeah, that's there. Yeah, it was called. Yeah, I called it a leap of faith.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was like that was my 40th birthday,
Wow.
and so anything like that. I love shoes. I love shopping. I have I won't call it an addiction yet,
Not
but
yet.
I do love fashion, shoes, and shopping.
Okay. Okay. What what's on your bucket list? What's one thing, the main thing on your bucket list? I know you said you did some zip lining, but what's on your bucket list? What's on Brandy's bucket list?
So one thing on my bucket list, I want to go to Bali and do a flying dress photo shoot.
A flying dress. I think I've seen that the past few months on Facebook.
Yes.
Do you do it in?
I want to ride a
You want to ride a what?
camel.
Okay, I think you. Well, they probably can do it in Bali, but I know definitely in Dubai. That's
Yes.
definitely in
Yeah,
Dubai.
Dubai. That's it.
Yeah,
Dubai.
yeah.
Yes.
Okay, okay, okay. So here we go. I got a few more questions for you, Brandy. And we
Okay.
before this, we said you're going to talk about books, business, and relationships. Now, you've told me some of the bad stuff about relationships. Are you in a relationship now?
No, I'm not.
You're not. What would it take?
Mm-mm.
What would it take for today's guy to get with Brandy? Because if they watching this, one, they thinking she don't have no time for me. She's too hurt, and she's gonna push me out right away because we see you don't really you're not taking no BS. That's one thing I've concluded, right? So what is it gonna take for some guy to come and get with Brandy today?
I appreciate that question. He did not prepare me for this. I just want to say that. So I do get that a lot.
Okay.
That will I push somebody away? But if you listen to the story today, pretty much wrapped up that I have put all of that stuff behind me.
Right.
It's harder for other people to put it behind them.
Correct.
It's almost like they're either fearful that it will come back to some degree. Maybe they feel like I'm faking it. I've had to convince people that I'm okay. They'll be like, I had somebody ask me, "Are you sure you're okay?" And I thought, do I act like I'm not okay?
Right.
But I have a true joy that rests on the inside of me, and some people don't understand that. And so, to answer your question, I think the man who comes into my life that will sweep me off of my feet will do just that. I think he won't be intimidated by what anything that I've gone through.
Right.
I do believe that he will support my endeavors, and I am semi busy. I think, I do a lot of things, but I do them a little bit of time.
Okay.
And so I'm a full time entrepreneur now.
Of
We
course.
thank God for it.
Yep.
And so even with that, when guys come along, I, I don't want anyone to ever think I just got to have my head down all day.
Right.
Please do me a favor. Take me away from my computer.
Right.
Take me anywhere.
Right. Right.
We can just go down the street. We could go for a walk.
Right.
But the guy who would really catch my attention would be someone who paid attention to me, to the little things.
Right.
And we could talk about more than business because I get that a lot too. And I'm okay with that.
Right.
I love what I do. I love helping people do what they do. But when we come out of that business brain,
Correct.
and we just want to watch TV, can we still get along? Can we do quirky, funny things together? Can we go get our toes done?
Right.
I mean, if they don't like it, it's fine. But, can we do yoga together?
Right.
I'm a very eclectic person. And so to be with a person who wants to box me in makes me feel really uncomfortable.
Right.
So I think the man who comes along will understand how to feed into my need to be both emotional and logical, and it won't be weird to them.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Okay. Okay. What has been some of the things that you find that intimidates them the most about you, if they were willing to
Now,
tell you?
Daryl,
Huh?
okay. So some of the things that have been intimidating, this is what has been told to me, that I was farther along than they were.
Okay.
So this is what someone told me, that he felt like we weren't compatible anymore because my business was thriving and they had just started theirs. Mind you, I helped them start theirs,
Okay.
but now it's like, oh, we're not compatible because you're already speaking and traveling. And it's like I had become this icon in our city, but they were not as, and that could have been an ego thing.
Correct.
And so that's really, usually it's, you're too busy. And I really am not. Like, we've sat here for an hour and 15 minutes because I schedule it. Now, that is usually the other hang up. People don't want to schedule with me. They want me to just have like an open life, and they could call me whenever, and they could just be like, at 5 o'clock, we going somewhere at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
I don't run my life like
Yeah.
that. And so I like spontaneity. I like surprises. But if I have to tell you no so many times, what does that sound like? Oh, well, you just don't have time for me. That could also be flipped to, you don't respect my schedule.
Right.
because I try to be upfront and say, hey, I have an interview, I have a book to edit. Editing takes a lot of brain work. And you can also send me to a Cash App and be like, hey, pay your editor this time. I want your time. Hey, however it works,
Right.
send me a DoorDash because I'm hungry. I think the intimidation comes because if people are unwilling to sit down and get to know you, and this is what they see the lavish lifestyle, they see author Brandy Hunt, they see me doing all the things, and then when they see me behind closed doors, they're like, you don't have no tricks. You don't have no speeches.
Right.
Nope, just me, my pajamas, and my
Right.
slippers watching
Right.
TV.
Right. Right.
And
Right.
so there has to be a balance in, who I am for the world and who I am behind closed doors.
Right.
I want to get to know a person so that I can be all of those things. And when it's time for us to hit the stage, we're gonna be dressed to the nines.
Right.
But I also want to be with you. I don't ever want a man to think he gotta push me up front and he's not important. Because if I got there and you were with me, in the trenches, so to speak, or not even I love what I do, so it don't feel like the trenches to
Right.
me. But we're going through this together. I want you to be right there so I can acknowledge you. I don't want to be like, it was just me, it was all me. And so I think the most intimidating thing has been my title and my position.
Okay. 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 Yeah,
These are
I can find a lot of truth in that. I can find a lot of truth in that, and I can see why. And me right now, the book that I'm writing, it's prompted some of the questions I asked you about that. Writing a book about men and some of the accountability, the things that we need to take accountability on. And it seems to me that women have they've kind of gotten frustrated and said, well, if it happens, it happens. But in the meantime, I'm gonna keep moving forward. The generations previously, like you said, your mother, my mother, they wanted to move, but then they got all depressed and wound up. I don't, and they stayed stuck for such a long time, and they kind of went without.
right.
And I don't see that so much with our generation. Our generation said, you know what, only for a little while, but I'm gonna get back up and I'm running up out of here. I'm moving forward. Any truth to that?
Well, we have more opportunity. Yeah, absolutely. We have more opportunity to do so. So think 20 years ago, I was 23. Cell phones was just hitting the scene. So let's back it up about 10 years. There was no girl. I mean, if they went on girls' trips, it might have been once a year. There was no brunching on Sundays. They was at church and church after church and church on
Right,
Wednesdays. Church all the time. And so I think now we do have more opportunity. Also with online dating, if I don't like somebody on a Monday, I literally don't have to go anywhere.
right,
I don't have to put clothes on. I can just take a picture that I've already had for a long time and pop it up on some site.
right.
I didn't have to do anything or go anywhere. And so our opportunity to connect to other human beings is just right there. Our parents didn't have that. And so I feel like they had to stay put or be single because their social circles weren't as big as ours have the ability to become.
Very, very good. Very good point. Very good point. That's very good. So, Brandon, we're gonna wrap it up, but I want to ask you two last questions. The first one is, what do you have coming up? What does Brandy have coming up? Where should people be looking to join and get into?
Oh, absolutely. So two main things. One on February 24th, 2024 in Greer, South Carolina, excuse me, Spartanburg, South Carolina. We are having a celebration of Black authors, and I hope you're able to come down. And it's going to be from 1 to 4. And if you're listening to this before then, he'll have all the info where you can register. Registration is free for people that want to come.
Correct.
It is a Black book fair, but that does not mean that other ethnicities cannot participate. That it just means we are celebrating Black authors, but everyone is encouraged to join. So if they're coming to buy a book, the registration is free. If you are an author and you want a vendor table, it's $30. And if you cannot provide your own table, it's $40. And if you are an outside vendor of other products, it's $50. But all of that will be on the link. And and it'll be all of that information will be provided. And then the other thing is I'm doing life coach certifications.
Okay.
So if you're interested in doing becoming a life coach, I have a class that I'm going to be starting in early March.
Okay.
And just email, send a message to that same email that you're interested in becoming a life coach, and then we'll jump on the line and I'll see if you, good fit. Everybody, some people want to be a life coach, and it may not be time, and so I always want to try to talk to people first to see where they are mentally, because it really is, it takes a lot of hard work and a lot of head work. And so if you are interested, email me and we'll talk about it.
Okay. That's great. That's great. That's great. Here we go. Last question. Last question.
All right.
Is there anything you want to say? Last words. What are your last words? Give it to him, Brandon.
My last and final words would be, don't sit around waiting for life to happen, because life is going to happen whether you deal with it or not. So you might as well deal with it and win.
Okay, you heard it. Miss Brandy Hunt, live and in person. I appreciate you, Brandy. Thank you very much.
You're
Your
welcome.
information is there.
Thank
Make
you.
sure you get that information to me about February 24th and also your event that's going on in March. I thank every one of you for listening. Remember to like, if you're listening, if you're watching it also on YouTube, like, share, and subscribe. I also go to Brandy. You still on YouTube?
Yep.
Yeah,
Same author, Brandy Hunt.
author Brandy Hunt. Make sure you go listen to some of other her other interviews with other people. She has her stuff going on as well. Busy Brandy, that's what we're gonna call it. Matter of fact, Busy Brandy, that's what we call you.
Absolutely.
Okay, okay. But you do have time, just so those guys that are
Yes.
listening that wanna. Hopefully, they don't be all in your inbox being creepy, but they come correct. Make sure they come correct. All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Brandy. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.